With me, I have the Canon R6 and the Canon R5C. And by the end of this video, you're going to know, is the R5C worth the extra money, specifically in a real estate application? Now, I'm not going to do the same video that everyone else does, going over things and reviewing things that just don't actually matter in the real world. This video has one goal. The R5C is clearly the better camera between these two. Otherwise, I wouldn't own two of these and none of these. So what we want to find out is just how much better the end result image quality is in the R5C versus the R6, and is it really worth spending the extra $2,000 to get one of these? So if you are in the market for a real estate oriented camera like these two bodies here, this will be the last video that you're gonna need to watch. So this is how I'm going to run things in this video. First, we're going to put these cameras head to head here in the studio to test things like dynamic range and noise performance. But I'm also going to take us to an actual real estate shoot that we're heading off to today to put these cameras in the exact environment that they're actually going to need to perform in, so we can actually see if the technical differences that we talk about and see in the studio actually translate to real world performance, which is, for me, what matters the most. Then I'll pull the clips into the editing suite and just see how much we can push these files to get the best result possible out of these cameras, so that you can leave this video with a pretty conclusive decision. Right, with that admin out of the way, let's start cooking, starting with the noise performance in the R6. So I've got some clips up on the timeline, as you can see, and what I'm doing in this test is just starting each camera at their lowest ISO setting and scaling it up until it maxes out. And we're looking for how much noise that we can see, but also how the camera treats the noise at certain ISO levels. When putting the R5C and the R6 side by side, it's actually quite interesting, and it did surprise me, as I know that the R5C has unbelievable noise performance. The R6 starts at 100 and the R5C starts at 160. Both are clean, with the R6 showing some noise around 320, while the R5C is basically as clean as it can get. Now, the R6 seems to fall off quite quickly early on, and by 640, it is looking quite noisy. For the R5C though, because of its ability to flick between two base ISOs of 800 and 3200, when jumping to 640, the image goes from clean to even cleaner. The R5C's image stays dead clean until around 1600, where it just starts to peek through. The R6 kind of did fall off big time from 800 through to 1600, but interestingly, you do see the image clean up between 1250 and 1600 quite a lot, pretty much identical to when it was at 800. The R6 does fall apart again, while the R5C does keep things well contained until around 3200, where honestly, I reckon the R6 is now ahead. Even though Canon doesn't really confirm the R6 has a dual native ISO, it is quite clear that there is something going on, because at 2500, the noise is horrendous. But at 3200, not only does the noise drop to levels comparable to when it was at 800, it's now beating the R5C. From this point on, the R5C just gets worse and worse, while the R6 keeps hitting these ISO levels again at 6400 and 12,800. It really does keep the noise controlled quite well.
Now, this is the issue I have with these kinds of technical tests where there isn't a real-world follow-up, because just from this test alone, you'd think that the R6 is better noise performance at the higher levels than the R5C, which is a lot more expensive.
But before we go into a real-world case, I did do another test that is much more of an indicator of real-world performance. Instead of just having the lens cap on and cranking the ISO up, this test I set up the cameras in a very dark hallway with just a little bit of light towards the end, and what I want to see is how well these cameras perform when there is an actual image to look at. Starting off, obviously it is dark as shit. You can see the first light come through both of these cameras at around 320 ISO, but straight away you can actually see visible noise and color deformation in the R6 versus the R5C, which is, although very dark, it looks like a very clean image. And this just happens for the rest of the test. By the time we hit 640, the R6 has fallen on its blade already, while the R5C has just switched into its second base ISO of 3200, and it's cleaned the image back up to pretty much non-existent. You can start to see a little bit of noise in the R5C around 1600. The R6 though is just out of focus, but it's still unusable. As the ISOs crank up past 3200, the R5C does become worse and worse, but the key result of this test here is the R5C in an actual low light test, where there is actually something to focus on, performed well and much better than the R6, whereas the R6 just really didn't even start at all. Okay, so that's the ISO performance testing done. Let's move to the dynamic range tests I did just before we actually head out to the shoot and just see if any of the stuff translates to the real world. For this test, I put the cameras outside at an angle where they're in reasonably favorable conditions, but it still puts the dynamic range of the cameras to the test. And the differences are actually quite easy to pick up on. Starting with the raw file from the R5C, which excels in this kind of environment, where it just has so much more information to work with. You can see that it is quite flat, but you can also see the details pretty much everywhere in the image. Dropping to just the standard XF AVC interframe clip in C-Log 3 on the R5C, you can already see a big difference in image when you look in the shadows down here in this tree, just losing a bit of that information. Shifting to the R5C though, forgive the fact that I stupidly didn't put the cameras in the exact same place. You can see that again, there is less information in the shadows versus the R5C's C-Log clip, but it does still have really good highlight retention. Now these differences are more noticeable when you convert them to Rec 709. So the raw clip, it's just so well balanced. The sky looks great, the house itself is well exposed, and the information in the shadows is just substantial, which makes it feel just that much more balanced and lifelike. Going to the C-Log 3 clip on the R5C, it's still a very nice shot. Well balanced, sharp. It is losing a little bit of shadow detail compared to the raw clip, and the R6 does the same, just losing a bit more information in those areas over the R5C's C-Log 3 clip. You can also see a bit of noise coming through now in the trees here, which is kind of a niggle. Zooming in on the shadow area just makes this all noticeable. So with the R6, it's just dark and it's noisy. The R5C and C-Log 3, it cleans the noise up completely, and you can see some detail return. But when you hit the raw clip, it's an even bigger jump. You can just see that there's just so much detail in there. It's actually kind of insane. Coming back out to 1x zoom and putting a more polished grade on the image, the R6 looks great. Like, it's nice and sharp, it's got good highlight retention in the sky, a little bit of visible noise in the shadows though, which is kind of grim, but overall this is a super great image and it's very professional. The R5C in C-Log though does take it up a step with no noise at all. It's got better information in the shadows, and it just balances the image out better than the R6, and overall it is a better end result. However, going to the raw clip, honestly, it just goes to another level. It's just so dialed in, like great info in the sky, everything is sharp, and the image is just so balanced and lifelike with all that information in the shadows pulling through. So quite obviously there is a clear leader across both of these tests, but I'm gonna say the R6 is holding on to itself pretty well. The thing is, when you're actually out on shoot, you're not just trying to exploit the camera's weaknesses, you're trying to optimize it. So considering it came out of the dynamic range test really strong, it'll be actually harder to tell the difference when we actually get some clips in a real world environment, which we're going to head off to right now. And just like that, we've spawned into the house that we're shooting today. This one is super nice. So let's talk gear for this shoot. So we've got obviously the R5C and the R6, but we're gonna use the exact same gear for both cameras, so that the only thing that is different is the camera body itself. So we're gonna be using the DJI RS4 gimbal. We're gonna be using the Canon RF 15 to 35mm f2.8 lens, and then we're going to be using a Nissi True Color polarizer. So what we're gonna do is just get a bunch of different shots in the inside and the outside, just to capture a range of environments in terms of lighting, to retest dynamic range, go into some low light scenarios to test the noise performance, and then again, just try and see like how much detail, how clear can the image be for both of the cameras. Because for me, in real estate, the thing I care about the most, or things we really only care about, is noise performance, dynamic range, how sharp and clear the image is, and that kind of all bundles up to one thing which I really care about, it's end result image quality. So I'm going to set these cameras up on the gimbal, get some shots, and get it going. Right, R6 mounted up, ready to go. Let's go and do the hero shot again like we did with the R5C. I've got it exposed, we're at 15mm, 800 ISO, f4 at 100 shutter. It's looking not too bad. Cool, so that's the kitchen shots done. We're going to do the dining room just through there. Again, we want to kind of see, because there's such large windows, can we really test the dynamic range between the inside exposures and the outside exposure? So the sun is coming down, which in this instance, it does favor us because the exposure outside looks very similar to inside, but hey, that's just, sometimes it is what it is. But we are gonna try and find a shot that does test the exposure inside to outside, so that we can really put both the cameras to the test and see if we can see any differences. Plop you here. Right, so we've got the bathroom now. Bathrooms are typically always low light, so it's a real good tester for both the cameras to just see how they can perform in low light. We want them to feel bright and like no noise, super sharp. So we'll kick it off with a wide shot with the R5C. Right, hero shot. In this particular situation, the sun is behind us or kind of beside us. It shouldn't be too challenging for the R6 to expose itself in terms of seeing the shadows, but also still seeing the blue sky. But we'll have a crack with the R5C. Right, R6. The shot's looking battery. Right, we are back at the desk. I've done the footage, I've edited the clips, and I've put a little bit of a grade on them, and I have some results. And I'm a little bit impressed and a little bit surprised at the same time. So let's start off with the kitchen shots. So the kitchen shot was in pretty favorable conditions. The sun was quite low, so you can see quite well out the window. And so the cameras weren't really having to deal with any massive differences in light on the surfaces of the kitchen. So really, this is as good as you're gonna get for a well-balanced image inside. Looking at the raw clips, the R6 does seem to have a difference in its colors. I know that they were set to the same white balance setting, but there is something's going on in the image. Maybe it's just the fact that it's a little bit more contrasty than the R5C's C-Log 3 clip, but I don't know. When you add the conversion light on though, you can start to see some differences in the quality. The R5C, it's just a cleaner and sharper image, and when you punch into 400%, you can see this much easier. The R6 is just so much softer and noisier. Coming back out to 1x zoom though and adding a little bit more of a professional grade on it, those issues are definitely much less apparent on the R6. Both images look epic and professional. The R5C for sure does have a visible edge over the R6, but the result I'm able to get out of the clip is impressive and something that I wouldn't have an issue setting to my clients. Shifting to a tighter clip of the kitchen, the same is true. Both images are great. The R5C does put a clear image up and has less noise, but when you really crank the focal length up and go for those super tight texture and detail shots, honestly, you can't even tell the difference between these two clips. And that is important. Like, being able to know how to maximize your camera's ability is how you can kind of hack the system and make it feel like you're using a more expensive camera than you actually are. Moving to the last shot of the kitchen though, a nice tight shot of the oven has exploited the R6 a little, just with its inability to keep noise out of the image. Anywhere where there is a black surface in the shot, you pretty much are gonna always run into noise getting in the way. When you punch in closer, you can see that compared to the R5C, it just has so much more noise going on. And for me, I just hate that. And I do think that it is quite unprofessional. Moving to a bit more of a dynamic range tester with big windows, I'm actually super impressed. The R6, I think, actually handles this shot as well as, or even better than the R5C. I actually prefer the R6 image here, just in terms of the way it's handling the outside and the inside. The R5C is a bit brighter, but I feel the R6 just feels a bit more balanced. Going into a low light situation though, things do fall back into the favor of the R5C. Even in rooms with no natural light, it is still able to bring an image to light that just looks crisp and clear with pretty much no noise. The R6, on the other hand, in this shot, as you can see, does battle a lot more in the shadows. Just a softer image all around, but in general though, it's holding onto itself quite well and it is a good image. But the R6, it does have a resurgence when there is enough light coming in, like this shot here, or when the whole image is dark, like deeper into the bathroom where the bath is, where you aren't battling with different lighting conditions in one room. It actually performs really, really well. You would be hard pressed to know for sure what clip is what if I didn't have the text up. The same is true for the bedroom shots. And honestly, if I didn't have the text up to show what image was which, you would have to go pixel peeping to actually figure out what one is what. Like, for sure, you can see that the R5C's clips here are just sharper and clearer, but like, just remember, one camera costs not far off $4,000 retail and the other one costs just over $2,000. Heading outside to where our last clip is where you really see the differences come between these two cameras night and day. Looking at this hero shot of the house on the R5C filming in 8K RAW, the image is just so good, so balanced. The sky is nice, the house is lit well, and the darker areas are still clear and crisp with no noise. Compare that with the R6's attempt, it still keeps the sky well in check, but you can just see the image overall feels a little bit sadder. The shadows are just darker and you are seeing visible noise even at its native ISO. So that's the real world testing part covered. Before I share my final thoughts between these two cameras and which one you should pick, here are just a few other observations I've made after testing them head to head. In terms of the file compatibility and ease of editing, your experience will definitely differ to mine depending on what editing setup you do have, but both the R5C and the R6 clips were really solid. I did have some issues every now and then when scrubbing fast between an R5C clip and an R6 clip, where the R6 clip was slow to kind of update. So potentially this is down to the R6 just being a little bit more compressed, or maybe it's just more incompatible than the R5C clip. I'm not too sure, but it is what it is. It's not really a big deal, as I can always just dial back the quality, but the whole point of me having a Mac like as good as this is to have that issue just not exist in the first place. The raw clips, however, as expected, are just so much tougher on the Mac. It plays back fine, but every now and then it does have to think a little bit. If you don't have a super powerful editing machine, editing Canon RAW files will wreak havoc on your editing efficiency, so that is worth keeping in mind. File sizes. The R6, when shooting 4K 60 FPS and IPB recording, runs at about 230 megabits per second. The R5C, shooting in 4K 60 FPS and XF AVC intraframe, is about 810 megabits per second. And when the R5C is shooting RAW and 8K 60 frames per second, it's pumping out well over 2 gigabits per second. So quite big steps up in bitrate, but you do get a return on that bitrate when you need to really stretch the image. In my experience with the R5C, going from long GOP, which is about 260 megabits per second, to intraframe at 800, I noticed a big difference in just being able to just stretch the colors more if I was to underexpose an image or a room more. It just seemed like it could tolerate more stretching before the noise really started to show up, which for me, when I'm trying to have no noise in an image, it's a great little tool to have up your sleeve. So what's my final verdicts between the R6 and the R5C? If you're someone like me that likes the highest quality image, lifelike sharp, and zero noise, the R5C 100% is the better option. There is a reason that I own two of them. Yes, the R6 stands its ground against the R5C in a few cases throughout the experiment, but at best, it would only really equal the R5C, whereas the R5C is able to perform better and easier across the whole spectrum when it comes to shooting real estate. However, the R6, in my professional and honest opinion, is 100% a camera I would not have an issue using with if the R5C was out of reach. You can just about get two R6s for the amount it costs you to get one R5C, or you could just get the R6 Mark II, which does have improvements over the original R6. What really let me down the most with the R6 was the noise. The softness for sure is a bit off, but that is only when you're really being compared directly to a higher end camera. Clients aren't going to really notice, and 100% you're going to be able to grow a multi-5-figure or even multi-6-figure content business with the R6 if you really wanted to. You can actually fix things like noise and softness with solutions like Topaz II, which only costs a fraction of what it would cost to jump to the R5C. So there are always going to be workarounds. But my suggestion for you, if you are in the market for a good real estate camera that can do it all, if you're making money already with your content business, I would highly recommend figuring out how to afford the R5C. It's just the best long-term purchase that you can make, and you pretty much eliminate all the bottlenecks you get when using a cheaper camera. If you're not making money, however, I recommend the R6. This is because if you are new to content, the camera isn't really your limiting factor. It's probably going to be your skills. So if you can afford the R5C off the rip, then 100% get it. You won't regret it. But if you can't, the R5.6 will be the backbone of your content business, and the quality that you can get out of it, as you've just seen in this video, it's excellent. Now, there is one massive but that I've taken from this video, and I guess the previous 5 years of doing content. If you buy the R5C, but cheap out on the lens, you're not going to get the same result as what you've seen today. An R6 with the best lens will outperform an R5C with a cheap lens. Let me know in the comments if you do want to actually see me do a cheap versus expensive lens test. I hope this video has helped make your mind up, or at least just given you a fresh perspective on these cameras in the real world and just seeing what actually matters and none of that technical kind of bullshit. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment if you loved it, or if you have any questions, and I'll see you next week.